Hey, what is up guys? This is Nishi from MST.TV back with another Market Watch episode. Today we're taking a look at a few cards that are currently trending on the market, but that maybe aren't as high key as some of the other cards that we've seen. Sure, things like Excel, Stardust, Synchro Dragon, and Fox Z-Tune are cards that everybody knows about and has their eyes on, but what I'm talking about instead are cards that are just starting to creep up, but people aren't quite paying attention to them yet. These are always valuable to know about because there's definitely still more room for the cards to continue trending upwards, so it's possible to pick up those cards now and continue riding that wave up. Let's get started. First up, we're looking at a hand trap type card that we haven't talked about in a really long time. It's Fantastical Dragon Phantasme. So for those of you that are newer players that might not recognize this card, this used to be one of the most expensive modern cards in the entire game. If your opponent special summons a Link monster, you get to special summon this card from your hand, and draw cards for each Link monster on your opponent's board +1, and then put back cards to your deck equal to the number of Link monsters your opponent controls. So if your opponent summons a second Link monster and they have 2 Link monsters on the board, you special summon this card, draw 3, and then put 2 back into your deck, which isn't too bad at all. The other thing that this card lets you do is discard a card to negate an opponent's card effect that targets a card that you control. So if you have this out, it lets you play around something like Infinite Impermanence or Effect Veiler. This card hasn't seen much play in a while, but now we are in a hand trap format where it seems like everyone is playing at least 9 hand traps in the main board. Because of this, players in the OCG are starting to put Phantasme back into their sideboards, and it seems that people in the TCG are starting to take notice and gradually starting to pick up their copies while the card is still cheap. This card has a few different printings. Each of them is a couple of years old at this point. The most notable version to watch is the Secret Rare from Savage Strike, where the first reds are around $25, while the unlimited copies are at about $15. Aside from this, the card does have Super, Ultra, and Gold Rare printings, with each of them between the $2 to $3 mark. Now, depending on your preference, I think that this is still a card that's worth picking up now. The card isn't all that expensive and definitely has the potential to go up more if it starts to see meta play. If you can grab the lower rarity printings for only $1 or $2, I think that that would be a worthwhile pickup while the card is still quite cheap, especially since the card has a proven history of getting expensive when it starts to see meta play. Up next, we have a bit of a weird one. It's Zodiac Borbo. So we probably aren't going to see either Barrage or Trident unbanned on the next ban list. However, Borbo looks like it might be an important piece of the rank 4 toolbox. Borbo has an effect that allows it to attack your opponent's life points directly, which of course means that you can use the card to go into Zeus. However, this does require you to use Zodiac Chakanine to make it with 2 level 4 monsters, since it's Chakanine that can be made as a generic rank 4. Now, it may seem like this isn't as great as using number 82 Heartland Draco, since both cards can attack directly. Using Chakanine and Borbo on top of 2 level 4 monsters actually means that you can use Zeus's effect twice, which is probably worth giving up that additional extra deck slot for. So for right now, there's nothing too crazy here in the TCG that can make use of this little package, but in the OCG, Vanquish Soul is a deck that's a solid tier 2 strategy, and most lists seem to use Chakanine and Borbo to go into Zeus, as they have quite a bit of extra deck space and they are able to make rank 4 monsters. So for right now here in the TCG, the card hasn't seen much usage or price movement, but I think it's definitely a card that is worth grabbing. The card only has 1 holo printing from an OTS tournament pack as a super rare, and those are just under $2 each. There is also the rare version of the card, which is $1, but while the prices are still so cheap and so similar, you are probably better off just picking up the holo version. Keep in mind also that as different Time Wizard formats get more and more popular, eventually there's going to be a chance that players will want to replay Zodiac mirror matches from one of multiple Zodiac formats, and for those, players will probably want to bling out the old strategies as much as possible. So yeah, overall, definitely a card that is flying under the radar right now, but if you guys can pick up a few cheap copies, I would definitely look at holding on to these for now. Alright, the next card we have is Trap Eater, which is kind of a cool one. This card does exactly what its name suggests. It's a level 4 tuner that you can special summon from your hand by sending a face-up trap card that your opponent controls to the graveyard, meaning that this card is going to eat up various trap floodgates, including Gos and Match, Skill Drain, Rivalry of Warlords, or Tyrant's Tirade, the last one being a floodgate that people are playing in the OCG as sort of an alternative to Mystic Mine. Now, in Super Heavy Samurais, you don't want to play Cosmic Cyclone or MST or Twin Twisters, so you choose to play Trap Eater instead to get rid of certain things. The cool thing is that since it's a level 4 tuner, Trap Eater is quite a flexible extender, allowing you to make a rank 4 Xyz, or maybe even a level 8 or level 10 Synchro. Now, Trap Eater did also get a super rare printing in one of the last couple of OTS tournament packs, so those are still really cheap options for you to grab for like 25 or 50 cents. However, it's worth noting that the ultra rares from Legendary Collection 5Ds are up to $4 to $5 each right now, those being the original higher rarity printing from a set that wasn't opened all that much. As a higher rarity printing, it's naturally what some players are going to want to pick up and use in order to bling out their decks and say that they are playing max rarity. Personally, I think that you guys are better off selling the ultras and just playing with the supers if you really need to, since it's not like either of them is an especially crazy or amazing looking rarity. I don't really see the card seeing much play outside of Super Heavy Samurais, and even then there are probably better options, so I think that you guys should try to maximize your value for this card and offload your more expensive copies of it wherever possible. On to the next one. This is a card that I've had my eye on for a little while. It's Ultimate Slayer. So I remember when this card was first revealed in the OCG, I thought that the card was nuts, and I do remember a lot of people using it over there as well. It lets you send an extra deck monster to the graveyard to bounce an opponent's monster with that same extra deck type back to your opponent's extra deck, and this card can't be responded to by your opponent's monster effects. This means that you could use it to out almost whatever threat you wanted to, including Appaloosa, Borreload Savage Dragon, or Destroy Phoenix Enforcer. In fact, I remember people picking up copies of Evil Twin Trouble Sunny just so that they could have something to dump and proc its effect in the graveyard if you wanted to get rid of a Link monster. Now here in the TCG though, the card was hyped initially, but it never really saw much competitive usage. I think the main problem is that the card only outs one monster, so it's a bit harder to use to break entire boards with depending on the format. Now, however, it seems that Ultimate Slayer is starting to trend upwards just a little bit. The card bottomed out at $14 to $15, even though it started off at around $50, so obviously the card has fallen off a lot since its initial release. However, the card is just starting to go back up, as it's up from $15 to now $20, which is still a solid like $5 increase. I don't know exactly why it is that this card is going up. If I had to make an educated guess, I would assume that it's branded Despia using it. They get a lot of additional value from the card since you can proc the effects of the extra deck monsters that they dump, so it actually speeds up what those strategies are trying to do, rather than just dumping generic cards and getting generic effects. I don't know exactly how much more potential this card has, but it is still worth keeping an eye on, I believe. This card will probably be reprinted in the 2023 Megatons, so don't go too crazy and don't invest in too many copies of it just in case, but if you can grab them for $12 to $15, especially in trades, it doesn't hurt to hold on to a few original printings of it, assuming that you can get first edition copies. Okay, so this is going to seem like a really strange one to have to talk about, but I do think it's worth mentioning. This is DD Crow. So DD Crow is a card that always seems to pop up every couple of formats and become relevant once again. In today's game, the graveyard is such an important part of the game state that getting rid of cards from there can really screw over certain strategies. It just so happens that we haven't seen this for a while. The card isn't that good against Spider Kashtira, and in tier limit format you had the Shufflebacks, which were just basically better versions of DD Crow. However, going into next format, I think that Crow might pop up once again, as it has started to in the OCG. Over there, Crow is sided in against Pearly and Mathmech, which are two of the top decks of the format, and based on the way that the TCG looks right now, I think that that could happen over here. In addition, the card could be situationally useful against other strategies, such as Gold Pride Punk or different runic variants. So of course there's the Ultimate Rare and Starlight copies of DD Crow, which are great, but we aren't going to worry about those too much right now. Rather, let's look more at the lower rarity printings. There are several different common, rare, and ultra rare reprints. Specifically, DD Crow got an ultra rare reprint in Battles of Legend Crystal Revenge, and it also has a dual Devastator rare printing as well. For right now, those ultra printings are around $1, and all of those different lower rarity printings are between $1 and $3. To me, I think that the Crystal Revenge copy of DD Crow could end up being a lot like Droll and Lockbird from Tactical Masters, where people just overlook it and don't pay too much attention to it, even though it is a very strong card, and then when the card is relevant again, it is going to go from being a bulk card to being worth a few dollars. I won't say that much more on it here since this seems pretty self-explanatory, but if you guys have the opportunity to go through some holo bulk, you can set aside a few copies of this card. I actually think that this is a pretty worthwhile pickup if you can grab them for 50 cents or $1. These have the potential to go up much more once the card is back in the format. Alright, so one other card that seems really undervalued right now though, this is going to be a bit of a riskier one, it's Forbidden Droplets. So at one point I remember this card had only one printing, the card was well over $100 each, which was crazy. Forbidden Droplet is a card that has been really strong at several points over the last several years. It's an important board breaker that can help facilitate OTKs as well, since unlike Dark Ruler No More, this card cuts your opponent's monster's stats in half, and you can still deal battle damage while also being a quick play spell card. I remember there was one time I was playing Dogmatica Invoked and my opponent had like this big dinosaur board that had set up multiple interruptions. I used Droplet to negate the board, made a Purgatrio, and attacked over everything for game. So right now Forbidden Droplet isn't seeing very much play, and it's mostly because of one specific deck, Kashtira. The existence of a Rise Heart in the game means that you can't pay the cost of Droplet, making this a pretty bad card right now, especially when Kashtira is the best deck in the current format. However, I think that after the upcoming ban list, we could see several changes to Kashtira, and so there's a chance that the deck might just not be relevant anymore, which would open the door to Droplet being teched back into people's decks. Right now, Droplets are actually very cheap. The original secret rares from Rise of the Duelist are down to $25, while both the reprint secret rares and the ultras are down to $15, which I think is the lowest that the card has ever been. Obviously, there are a lot of different variables here. We might not see the Kashtira deck get hit hard enough, or it's possible that we could see another Droplet reprint in a Battles of Legend or something like that, and the card could get even cheaper than it already is. However, I do think it is worth looking at picking up a few copies of Droplet while the card is so cheap, especially the originals or the ultimate rares, since even if the card does get reprinted, those versions are more likely to retain a greater percentage of their original value. I would just keep an eye on this card and maybe pick them up locally if you can get them in a more favorable trade, because I do think that the card has a lot of potential to go back up in price, assuming that the format is set up for it. Alright guys, there's one last card for us to talk about today, and it is Gos and Match. Gos and Match is of course a Floodgate Trap card that has been in the game since Crossroads of Chaos, so since Black Rose Dragon first came out. This is a very simple Floodgate that locks each player into only controlling one monster of each attribute. I think that this is an important card for us to pay attention to because all versions of it are currently starting to trend upwards. Now in the current format, it's actually very useful against a lot of top tier decks, making life difficult for Kashtira, Super Heavy Samurais, and Pearly. The only thing is that Gos and Match has to be used by something that won't be hurt by it. Specifically, I think that Labyrinth and Runic are decks that can use Gos and Match to shut down your opponent from playing while continuing to execute their own strategies. For instance, against Kashtira, if you chain Gos and Match to Theosis, your opponent just lost a card and is now under a pretty harsh restriction as well. Gos and Match is definitely a cool card, and it just got a reprint in Magnificent Mavens as an ultra rare. However, I think that Gozen is something that players are overlooking as basically still being bulk right now because it just got that recent reprint. Despite having a couple of common and a couple of holo printings, all copies of Gos and Match right now are between $2 to $3 each. I think that a lot of players opened up Mavens looking for the Ishizu cards, Impermanence, Talents, Lightning Storm. A lot of other cards from this set were just kind of thrown into bulk unless they had this really big name. However, Gos and Match is actually worth a couple of dollars right now, even for the commons from Crossroads of Chaos or the Salamangreat structure deck. If you happen to have this card in your bulk, I would definitely suggest digging them up and offloading them while you can and seeing how much you can get for them. The card could possibly get a Rivalry of Warlords treatment in an upcoming side set where it gets reprinted as a rare and goes down to being like a 25-cent card. So you guys are going to want to maximize your value from this card's cheaper printings while you still can. Alright guys, that is all we have for today. There is certainly a lot of opportunity that can be found all over the market if you guys just know where to look. I know it can be difficult or complicated when there are so many variables. We have to deal with an upcoming ban list and there's always more reprint sets coming out. You just never know exactly what is going to get reprinted, but that's kind of the fun of it. Sometimes you guys are going to hit and other times you're going to miss. Anyways guys, if you did enjoy today's Market Watch, please make sure that you let me know by hitting that thumbs up button. Also make sure you leave a comment in the comment section down below. Let me know what you guys think about today's cards and let me know what other cards are currently trending on the market as well. Also, if you haven't already, do make sure that you guys hit that subscribe button. And until next time guys, don't forget to hold on to your MST.TV.